Good afternoon. Welcome to Klingspor's Woodworking Shop Woodworking Extravaganza 21st anniversary. I am Mike Z.
I am Chris.
And today we are joined with Stevie from Built by Stevie. You ready, Stevie? There we go.
I'm ready.
Can you hear us okay? Very good.
Yep. Can you guys
well,
hear
thank
me?
you for joining us. And yes, absolutely. So if you could you give us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what your shirt represents?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Stevie Essler, and I run a company called Built by Stevie out of Nashville, Tennessee. And my shirt says carpenter because I am a carpenter, so a female woodworker. And I'm currently sitting in my house at my desk office, which my staff are busy at work in the shop. It was a little loud to be in there behind my famous pink wall. So so you're getting the built-ins that I built that I haven't yet finished trim, because the cobbler's kids shoes don't have shoes. Well, the carpenter doesn't have finished woodwork in her own house.
Just like the plumber always has the leaky faucet. Yep.
That's right. That's right.
Well, very good. So I know we were kind of just going to hit on, women in woodworking today, just because it's a growing trend that we're seeing a lot of. And I think because of social media, we're able to see more of that than ever before. I'm not saying that women haven't always been in woodworking, but really there's a boom because of social media that brings so many more things to light as far as what's going on out in the world, especially in your case, where this wasn't exactly the trend you were going to in life, was it?
It was not. It was not. So my background is actually in event planning, and I was in corporate world, wearing suits and high heels and looking fancy for work. And now I, wear Carhartt pants and like a carpenter t-shirt and boots pretty much every day.
Which is more comfortable?
I'm going to say it's probably the Carhartts and boots with the t-shirt every day. Actually, and we're still, it's still a little warm. It's a little chilly right now, but it's still a little warm. It's like we've been wearing like running shoes and shorts in the shop because it's it's hot. I mean, we've got AC and whatnot, but I'll take dressing down any day over wearing suits and heels.
Agreed.
Oh yeah,
Although
smelling sawdust is always better than, office supplies.
This is true. This is true. I'll take having, I guess if you look really close, I have paint splattered all over me. Only because this morning I was spraying some built-ins that we're doing, and I had the spray gun got a little came back, got me right in the face. So but you know what? I'd rather be covered in paint than I don't know, sitting at a desk all day.
Other women are painting their nails. You're painting your face. All right, that works out well.
This is true. This is true.
I know one of the coolest things that, because I follow you a lot on your social media, is there's a lot of women who have woodworking channels and do a lot of content. But what I've noticed is a lot of those same women aren't actually doing the woodworking. But with you, it's complete opposite. You're not just the face. You are the actual woodworker who's doing the work.
Yeah. Yep. So it's like everyone's got to start out somewhere. Like I started out as a DIYer teaching myself, like honestly, I'm self-taught. I was teaching myself how to build things and figure things out in my garage. And then when the company actually became a company, I was the main builder. I still am. I have a team. Now I have staff that work for me, but I am still in the shop, busting my bum, working. Yeah. So whenever clients get in contact with us, there's kind of the process, they'll speak to my assistant and they get an appointment scheduled up. But then I'm the one who comes and designs, takes measurements, dreams up the space with them. And then I will have my hand, I will touch every single thing that goes out of the shop. I will have some side of touching. So it's like, did I stain it? Did I cut it? Did I build it? Did I do the whole thing? There's a lot of times that we've been so busy right now in the shop. There's some projects where I've started the project, I've handed off, and then I'm working on one project that it's a vanity, that will be completely me. I'm the only person that actually will touch this vanity. So sometimes I'm the only person, and then a lot of times I'm handing off to the next staff person.
And how many staff members do you have?
Yeah, so I have 2 full-time and I have 2 part-time, and then I also have a personal assistant who keeps me in order. Otherwise, I would not be sitting here, actually.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain.
So how many years have you been doing this?
So I am still a newbie. At the end of the day, when people So I launched the business officially um, 6.5 years ago. Yeah, so 6.5 years ago, the business became a business. But my first time to ever use a saw was 8 months ago. Actually, this month, or 8 years ago, not 8 months ago, 8 years ago. So in 2013, in October, I bought a house that I ended up flipping. And that was the first time I had ever used a miter saw, as my uncle brought it over, showed me how to do it, and I learned how to lay my own hardwoods on the floor, on the whole first floor. And then I kind of got the bug from that. So from
Mm.
that, it was, hey, let me Google how to build a headboard. Let me literally Google how to build a table. And I just started literally figuring things out. So I'm still so new, like so new to the woodworking world, where I've got, some friends who have been building since like high school. So mine's been something that I started in my 30s.
Very cool.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times, what I've noticed is the people who are just getting into it actually have a unique perspective on the projects they're working on
Oh,
because they
I
bring a
can't
fresh
hear.
idea.
Did it cut out on you?
I don't know. Did it? Hello,
Can you hear
hello.
us, Stevie? She's like, nope.
Oh, crap.
We hear
It
you.
happens. Technical difficulties.
I don't know what happened.
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear her. She'll be right back. That's how it works with live sometimes.
The magic of live.
That's right.
So, Mike, tell us about some of the specials we have going on right now.
Now's a good time to talk about specials. Wait, let's see
Oh,
if did that work
I'm
better?
back. I don't know what happened.
Maybe the battery
Can you hear me?
died. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, all of a sudden I was like, and I'm done.
No, that'll work. Well, we were actually just going to there's your biggest fan right there, Mr. Coleman Forshey.
Oh, hello, Coleman.
So we're going to talk real quick about our specials, and then we'll jump right back into it. So biggest specials are 30% off books and DVDs. If you shop woodworkingshop.com, pick yourself up a book to find out what you can turn or make next. 10% off CA glues and CA glue accessories. 15% off all Klingspor abrasive discs, sheets, belts, wraps, you name it. If it's abrasive and we carry it, it's 15% off. And ArborTech, 10% off till the end of the month. Make sure you check out all those ArborTech tools. That's it. That's all we got.
Yeah, and if you want to learn how to get into woodworking like Stevie, you don't have to Google it. You can buy a book.
This is true.
Then you can reference it at any time. You don't have to have the internet.
That's right.
True. Now, I do have an old book that my grandfather gave me, and it's actually was written in the 70s, but I call it like my Bible of cabinetry. And it is literally a woodworking book of how to build cabinets, kind of the old fashioned way, which is actually how we build majority of our things, with dado joint, like all different types of joining. So we don't use a lot of screws. We do a lot of rabbets, dados, that kind of stuff. But I will say that is probably, if there's a book that I actually read on woodworking, it was that one. And that's a pretty big one. So that was kind of one of those, I'd read a little bit here, a little bit there, and then read it all the way through. And it still is a reference guide. So a lot of times my staff will ask a question. I'm like, actually, let's go back and like look at that book. Cause I honestly trust that book sometimes more than I see things on social media.
Mhm.
And even though I learned that way, but I like the book style.
Well, and if the book has something described in it that you like that approach to it, then that gives you that trust equity in that book as well. Cause then maybe it fits your style a little bit better.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of places you can go to watch content online, but it doesn't always give you the best method of performing that.
Yeah, that's very true.
Now, I do have
So
a question as far as you said that you had gotten some information from social media. Do you ever find that Pinterest is helpful or hindering when it comes down to talking to a customer or a client?
that's a good one. So I would say I used to actually probably hate Pinterest. Now I have mixed feelings. I'm probably 75% pro Pinterest and 25% like, nope, not going to happen. I think it is a great thing because it teaches us, it not necessarily teaches, but it shows you other examples of what looks pretty, what looks good with styling and color and whatnot. But it is funny because a lot of times people see things on Pinterest and they're like, oh, you can do this and it's easy, right? It's just, I saw this hack on Pinterest and I'm like, oh, not that easy. Like,
Yeah.
not that big of a hack. I think my biggest beef with that kind of stuff, like the Pinterest DIYer type thing, is that it says, hey, you can go to Home Depot and grab all of this wood for, $150, which right now it's, close to 450. And then, you've got this beautiful 10-foot dining room table. All in all, you spent $500 on this table. And I'm like, oh, actually, no. It's like those things that you don't take into account is like, do you have a table saw? Do you have a miter saw? Do you have a sander? Do you have all the tools that you need to build this? Because that's money too. So if you don't have all of those
Mhm.
tools, you can't build that table for $500. And then of course, it's like being, more of a fine woodworker. I'm always going to have beef whenever people are building things out of Douglas fir and spruce from Home Depot. 10 buck, $2 pine, it's who knows what you're going to be screwing into.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's a pro and a con. I do like it for design style, but it does put out there, an aloof that you can just build something really, really fast for super cheap. And that is usually not the case.
Mhm.
True. Very true. I always find that whenever, excuse me, whenever there's something like a post, my wife will show me and I'll go through and I'll look at the different steps in it and I'll be like, but they're missing like one crucial step.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, but I'm like, something's not adding up here as far as I think they're leaving out like the secret sauce of what made this a $500 table.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what I have to tell people whenever they ask me, like, hey, I saw this. Can you build this for me? And then I give them a price and they're like, wait, well, on this website, it says, it's only $500. I'm like, well, that's if you have the knowledge and the tools. And if you're using cheaper material, which
Mhm.
I have knowledge, I've got the tools and I'm not using cheaper material. So this is your price.
Yeah. And it's a re-education in some ways too, because it is inspiring. Pinterest is inspiring, but at the same time, it can also really hinder certain things. So yeah, the love-hate relationship with Pinterest is there.
Well, and a lot of times those photographs they take, they're not true representations of what the final thing looked like. They've got the lighting a certain way, the camera angle a certain way. So if you were to go to
Yep.
the other side of the table, you'd likely see the giant gouges and the swirl marks from the sanding and all the things that don't show up in the photograph.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Like I said, it's a great thing for design and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you're not seeing the full picture of what is actually being built and what's actually being made. So yeah.
Mhm. Now, you just don't build cabinets and furniture. You actually will do construction as well, correct?
A little bit. I mean, if we're gonna bust out, it depends on now if it's we won't now in my own house, I'll be doing things. But as far as like when we're working with clients, like we're coming in, we're not changing any walls, we're just adding to existing. So
Mhm.
that's where built-ins and furniture, and like I mean we have a client right now that we're doing a massive closet project for, and they decided to take out their closet and build it out. So we're actually waiting on a handyman to come and do all the drywall work so that we can get in there and put drawers. Like, so we're doing essentially a built-in inside the closet with cubbies and drawers.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a few of your posts where you were working around some bare studs and
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well,
there
there's some of
must have been some construction on your own property there.
Okay, yes. So I did build my own shop last summer and I hired a team to build my pole barn. So I've got a big old 3,200 square foot pole barn in my backyard. And I did hire a team to do like the structural, like actual building build.
Mhm.
And then my staff and I did last summer, we ended up framing the insides that we could put insulation and hang it. Instead of doing drywall, we hung up OSB so that we could screw directly into the wall and just have more, wall space that's actually usable.
Mhm.
So that I learned construction last summer, which was something I had not really done. And I really learned that. And then that was a whole other experience because I'd never installed insulation. And that was I was itchy. Let's just say I was itchy for quite a few days post
Mhm.
insulating the pole barn.
Oh, I'm sure.
Fiberglass is great for that.
Oh man, I was literally taking tape and just putting it over my face and my neck, trying to pull off as much as possible. And there's like tricks. Like I actually did watch a YouTube video on how to like get insulation fiberglass like off your skin. Cause that is oh man, for a week, like I was itchy for a solid week. I was itchy. And I told my staff, I was like, if a tornado comes through here and tears down my shop, I will not do my own installation next time. I will hire someone.
Or would you spray the insulation in, like the spray foam insulation?
I mean, that stuff is pretty legit.
Mhm.
That stuff is pretty legit. So all I know is after building this whole shop last summer, I will not be building another shop for myself. I will hire out the entire process. It was a great one-time experience. But I think that I will keep my personal experience into furniture and cabinet making.
There you go.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't hurt to just stay in your lane and let someone do that kind of stuff.
Yep. And that's what I tell my clients. I'm like, that's what we are known for, built-ins and furniture. And I've got a list of handyman, men and women. Actually, I've got a few women on my list now too, which is really fun, who come in and do drywall and paint and just fix up your house where we can do it, but my talent is better off in the shop doing a built-in or building a
Mhm.
nice table for someone. Yeah.
Now, did you ever find that the original career path of event planning has actually come in handy for the designing, the coordination of, the entire thing from getting materials to the finished product install day?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually took in college, I actually took a it was like a room planning class, I guess. So it was like a space class, and you would figure out where everything needed to go so that you had better flow throughout a room. And when I'm coming into a lot of new builds right now, and people are asking, hey, we want to, like, this is going to be our living room, but we also want built-ins here. We want this, we want this. I can actually walk around that house and like see outlets and see space from doors, knowing that like we need certain amount of inches, between cabinets and an island and from a doorway that's usable. So I am so glad I actually did take a class on like a
Hmm.
room space, because I've learned that I apply that all the time, like every time we're doing a new build. And then also as planning with right now with materials and whatnot, like I'm really having to plan out. We actually just started seeing a shortage in the last couple weeks for like our industry on a lot of plywoods that we had and that we now do not have. And so now it's like, okay, I really have to plan out a couple builds at a time. Like, so whenever I'm ordering material and supplies, we're pretty much planning about a month to 2 months out right now whenever I'm buying supplies. So yeah, lots of planning. So it's like I sit here, if I've got I'm sitting here with my notepad, taking notes for a couple builds that we're doing, and I'm writing my list out, getting it ready.
Yeah, material list is getting to be a tough one right now. It used to be very easy where, hey, I'm running low on this, this, and this, but
Yeah.
now you have to almost plan accordingly ahead of
Yeah.
time.
I mean, my big plywood supplier, they called me a couple weeks ago and said, there's no 5/8 Baltic birch pretty much anywhere in the United States right now. Whenever it comes in, do you like, how many pallets do you want to buy? That's what they actually asked me, like how many pallets. And I had not ever bought a pallet before. Like usually we're buying, anywhere between like 5 to 15 sheets at a time. And that's how they're selling it now though, is in pallets. So I went ahead and placed an order on some 1/2 inch just to have in the shop. But I had to buy minimum 22 sheets because that's that's what they're requiring us to do right now, which is fine. But that's like really planning ahead.
Yeah. And it also changes everything too, because what used to be 5 or 15 sheets you could pick up once a week now has
Mhm.
become a pallet. Now you have storage, and
Yeah.
it's different altogether.
Yeah. We're about to add a lean-to on the back of our shop, where we're going to actually I'm going to do an insulated and air controlled, probably, I think it's actually going to be 12 feet deep. So a 12 by 22 foot room that will be, it will go up to 12 feet, ceilings. And we're going to it's literally just going to be wood storage, because right now it's like, I'm having to buy
Bulk.
massive. I've got a big shop. I've got plywood storage. I've got it all. But in order for us to get this much wood in the shop right now to plan, just so that we do have it, and we're not running out of it, we're having to add, to the building. So something I did not think, good problem, but something I didn't think about, it's when I built the shop last year, the shop is almost 3 times the size of what my last shop was. And I really did not think that in just 1 year, I would be busting at the seams and having to add more storage just for materials right now.
Now your shop, the first shop you had was in like a retail spot?
Yeah. So my very first shop was in my garage. So my 2-car garage. And then I went to a retail spot, and I was there for 4 years, and then built my shop last year.
So have you noticed that there's a big difference between having headroom and because you had a drop ceiling in the retail space?
Oh my gosh. So I had 8-foot 4-inch ceilings, and a lot of built-ins that we do, were 8 feet, 9 feet. We've got some 10-footers, and I was never able to stack those on top of each other to even really see what they looked like. It was a lot of taping out, doing a lot of, like, we would measure something out on the floor, and then I'd set it and see if it fit into that box to make sure that like an upper was going to fit perfectly. And then, they say, measure twice, cut once. This was measuring like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times to make sure that what we were about to build was going to be exactly what we needed to build. And of course, accidents happen and you've got to rebuild things. But now I have 12-foot ceilings and a 10-foot built-in. That's nothing. That can almost sit on top of a workbench and get built.
I need you to build me a 14-foot tall cabinet. Can you do that?
Woo. That I'm going to build outside.
Okay.
Got a garage door now. I can open that up.
Yeah. I got the 10 by 10 garage door, so we can lean it to its side and get it out.
Awesome.
So compared to the retail space, do you have a finishing room now?
Yes, I do have a finishing room. So the old space, I had a tarp that hung down from the ceiling about halfway through the back of my table saw. And that's where I painted. It was about 4 feet wide by, I think, 10 feet long. And I would squeeze in there. And if I leaned over too much, my butt would hit the table saw. So not very much space and storage. Now I've got a paint room. So we've got I think it's 12 or 13 feet by 20 feet. And then the 12-foot ceiling. So I've got a massive paint room for me, which is great. And it's, like I said, like this morning I was painting some built-ins that we're installing next week. So the fact that I can wheel everything in is a heck of a lot better than what I used to work with. So yeah. And Mike, you're outside like that. You paint outside.
Yeah. Yep.
So
that's the easiest for me.
That is, yeah. Because you do, and you have tents up and whatnot. It's like you're covered and.
We got the outbuilding that attaches to the house, just like a carport, but everything's brought in underneath there, but everything's outside. So it's straight to the elements, but it's a lot easier for me. It's more room.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I've definitely set up sawhorses, and I'll paint outside too. And I think that people don't realize that whenever we're painting, like that stuff dries pretty fast when we're spraying. So you're not really worried about bugs and all that other stuff. And it happens, but I mean, that happens in my paint room. Actually, yesterday, literally had a spider, right in the middle of the paint. I was like, oh, okay. You were right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was, certain times of the day, like in the afternoon where you have those little fruit flies that are flying around in a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
then I won't be spraying anything like that because I know they'll go straight to the paint and stick right to it.
Yep.
So you just pay attention to things. But yeah, no, it's a lot faster. Finishing outside, a lot of people kind of, how can you do it? How do you not have bugs everywhere? But really, it's not that bad. It dries pretty quick. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
See, I've been often wondered, how do you do it in the rain?
That's what the carport's for.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
it's
Chris
a
just-
watered down look. It's a speckled paint look.
Oh,
Yeah, that sometimes works. Chris just got into HVLP spraying again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's got his Fuji going, so he's learning the art.
Nice. Yeah, I just went to Airless back in November. For what I was just I'm spraying so much, like so many big built-ins, and I was like, I need the hopper. I can pour pretty much a gallon plus into the paint sprayer and just go to town. So, but I still have my HVLP gun and I use it. I still use it. It just is not it's not my main sprayer anymore.
well, once you reach a certain level, i.e., like Mike, you don't really deal with those little toys anymore. You're on the expert level, and not everybody sprays 1,000 miles an hour like Mike either. So that's how he overcomes the wind, I suppose.
Gets
He just
even closer and
outruns it.
faster when it's windy.
It's true.
Yeah, you spray real close when it's windy.
Yep, that's true. That's very true. Right there, you're like right on top. Just
Right on top, or you just wait. You see. I look at the trees and I'm like, all right, gusts are gone, and then I hit spray real quick. Yeah.
Okay, so if you could go back to yourself when you first got into this, what would you advise yourself? Not just as a woman, but as a woodworker. What would you advise yourself to do differently than the way you did it?
That's a good question. I think I would tell myself to start using nicer wood sooner than later. I think, it's like I said, like everyone starts out somewhere, and I was really a DIYer at the very beginning when I was building my own stuff, like very much a DIYer and going to, big box stores and buying materials. And I'm glad I did it because I learned a lot. Like I learned wood movement and what things are actually straight, what things are not, what's going to hold a screw, what's not, what types of screws to use. But if I when I do tell people now, they're like, oh, what do you think? I'm like, listen, start using good material. Whenever you up your game just by upping your, and yeah, like you're going to spend a little bit more, but the quality that you're going to put out and that you're going to build for yourself and build for others is going to trump everything that you were building earlier. And so, yeah, it's like spend a little bit of money. It's going to be quite a bit easier. You're going to go through the process a little bit faster. You're going to enjoy it a little bit more. You're not trying to make a piece of wood fit that, it's got some movement. It's got a bow or a bell or curvage to it. And you are really trying to bust that into something. And whenever you've got a little bit nicer piece of wood that's come through, you can play with that a little bit more. Yeah, I would probably tell myself invest in better quality material. And then also I did this, and I tell people this, and I still actually stand by this, but I didn't buy a lot of brand new tools whenever I first started. I bought a lot of things off of Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. You can find some really good deals, especially right now. Everyone that was home this past year bought really expensive tools, and there's a lot of people that are back at work now and they're not using those tools. And like our Facebook Marketplace in Nashville is filled with top brands, name things that are, close to half off because people aren't using them anymore. But I bought used tools. I bought a lot of used big tools. Now hand tools I bought, pretty much brand new, but all the big tools I bought used. Like there's only a few things that were brand new. And then slowly, as I got more into it, I would replace them with something nicer, maybe brand new. Even still checking like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist for a lot of that stuff. But I think woodworking is an expensive hobby, and it also is an expensive job at times. And so buying that nicer piece of equipment after you've decided that this is going to be something, like it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. But if it's something that you're not going to be doing all the time, like buy something used and fix it up. I mean, that's how I actually really learned a lot of the things, how my machines worked, was I would buy it and then I not really necessarily take it apart completely, but I would mess around with it to clean it up. That way I kind of knew what screws went where, what blades went where, and then I would upgrade blades, especially on like the planer and the joiner and the bandsaw. I would just upgrade some of the small things. And next thing I know, I've got something I bought for $250 off of Craigslist and then put maybe a $50 blade on it. And now I'm running a great machine that I didn't spend $1,500 on. So that's kind of one of my, like, figure out what you need, use it, and then go buy a new one later.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
And sometimes to see if you like it, buying 10 tools for $5,000 is worth it versus going out and buying 3 tools for $5,000 that are really good tools. But
Exactly.
so learning what you like and what you're interested in is definitely a good way to get into it. So
yeah, because at the end of the day, like I would call myself a machinist. Like, sure, I use hand tools, but I'm using hand tools, but I'm not using, I use chisels and all that stuff every now and then, but I'm not doing them every day, where I have a lot of friends who almost strictly use hand tools, and for our business, that just wouldn't work.
Right.
But if I had bought a bunch of hand planes and chisels at the very beginning, maybe I wouldn't be doing more machine work, but I decided I was more a machinist, and I enjoy that. So
Nothing wrong with that.
nope.
Coleman's got 2 questions for you. One, any lasting injuries from the cart accident? And then also, where is your never dirty rolling in mud puppy?
Oh my gosh. So yes, last summer, built the shop, had a really funny video that's still on Instagram where I was like, I just built this cart. I'm going to say happy Friday, everyone, and, roll out for the weekend. And I ate it. I ate, instead of eating crow, I ate concrete, and thankfully I'm okay. Little jarred. Still probably one of the funniest videos. I can laugh at myself at still, because it was pretty funny. And that puppy, who was always rolling in sawdust and mud, last night was so proud of herself because we had just put a bunch of sawdust out, rolled in, came in the shop, shook off. What was it on Charlie Brown? It's like the little boy that like, is it Lionel that has like this Linus has the stink smell around him. That's how I felt my puppy. Like, she always has Kingpin, yes. And always has the like the smell. My puppy has like the constant sawdust halo around her. So she got a bath last night, and literally this morning, first thing she did was she ran out to the sawdust and rolled in it this morning. I was like, okay, well, today is probably an air hose day, probably not a full bath day, but for sure an air hose day.
Wow. Shop pets.
Yeah, shop pets. But she's my little buddy. It is fun too. A couple of my staff have dogs. So I feel like we now have I should call it Stevie's Doggy Daycare, because it's the whole property is fenced in. So the dogs today we've got 2 puppies out here with her running around playing. So while we're in the shop working, they're out, actually she's teaching them how to roll in sawdust, because I've now learned how to roll in sawdust. I'm like, my dog's the bad influence these days.
Yeah, that happens. At least you have the room for it. Having a dog friendly place is always good, because then everyone's happy.
Yeah. Yep. We have a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's not too shabby walking out my back door and walking about 250 feet out to the shop every morning. It's pretty nice. And the puppy just runs out there with me. So, and she's a shop dog now. She likes to come in the shop and hang out, where a lot of times before, I think she tolerated going to the shop with me, but she's got a couple beds. Actually, the dog literally has 3 beds in my shop at different places. And so depending on where she wants to go rest herself down, she can go to one of those beds.
And most dogs wouldn't choose the bed at all. They would just go find somewhere you didn't want them to lay to go put themselves.
Oh yeah. Yep. Well, thankfully she's learned. Like man, I do think having dogs in the shop can be like a pro and a con. And like the biggest con is that if you're at the table saw and something bumps up into you, like you just don't want that type of distraction or anything. So
Mm.
she does get scolded when she comes close. Like whenever I'm about to do something, and anytime she would come next to a big machine, I'd look around, no, no. And so now she won't even come near the table saw, which I actually appreciate, because that's, I don't need I don't need her wet nose hitting my leg while I'm pushing something through and me jerking.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So do you keep the finishing room closed off when she's around?
Actually, you know what? She does not go in the paint room. I don't know if she just is like, this is weird. What's in here? Probably because we always have fans and heaters going and stuff like that. So it's just not that the shop is any less loud, but she does not really walk into the paint room. So
Well, that's good. Last
have
thing
to,
you want her to go in there and shake off and
oh,
dust just.
No, the
she,
worst is when they rub against it while it's still wet.
yeah.
Then it
So
sticks in the fur, and it's like, oh.
yeah, she's a black brownish dog, and she has many times had white marks on her because she has rubbed up against something in the paint. Or it's
Wow.
like, I actually the other day I wheeled out 4 sets of upper cabinets, and she did hit one of them, and she hit a dash on her tail. So until it completely wears off, because that's paint on dogs, man, that takes forever. I can get it out of my own hair, but I can't get it out of my dog's hair.
No. Nope, agreed. Yeah, whenever my wife's painting something, I have to pay attention to make sure the dogs aren't heading over that way. And sure enough, tails, sides.
Yes, always. But we love them, so keep them around.
Yeah. Spoil them too. 3 beds in the shop. Nope, I get it.
I know. I mean, seriously, like this dog is so spoiled in the shop.
Well, and if you've got any questions for her, please just leave them below. And if it's something you got after the fact, maybe you're watching this tonight or a week from now and you've got questions. If we can't answer it for you, we'll reach out to it and get you an answer from Stevie herself for sure.
Absolutely. I do a little video response.
You put it in your stories.
Yeah.
Yep.
So tell us about the carpenter movement.
Yeah. So it's a really fun, this has been a really fun, I think, journey for me, especially the last handful of years, whenever I kind of moved into it's like I was doing smaller projects, and now I'm into this bigger, like into the bigger realm of building. And it's been fun to be, at the very beginning, when I first started building, I didn't really realize that there weren't a ton of women that built like full time. There's a lot of DIYers, a lot of DIYer women. I would say probably more DIY women than men. I would almost venture to say that's who I see majority of on YouTube and whatnot. And as I'm building things and I'm realizing like, hey, like I am really a small number in a very large fish of sea of men in the woodworking world. And one of my friends was like, well, you're really a carpenter. Actually, my friend came up with it whenever I was building something for her. And, it was kind of one of those like light bulb moments that was like, you know what? This is actually like, this could actually be a movement that I would love to kind of, if I'm going to be the person that's going to spearhead it, then like, let's do it. But really encouraging women, young girls to go out, like pick up a saw, pick up a drill, and start building. And it's been really fun because there's a lot of, I would say, a lot of dads. Like I probably have more dads that reach out to me than anyone else, but dads that reach out and they're like, hey, I've got a 6-year-old girl who wants to be with me in the garage every single time I'm building. And now I can show her, hey, look at this girl. She's building. Like, this is a girl that's also building. She's doing this, she's doing that. And it's fun to get to be an example to young kids, like a lot to like a lot of young girls, but then also there's a lot of women now who I've become really good friends with through social media, because they're now, they were DIYers and they were watching me, and now they want to up their own game. And so now they're building, like they're starting to do cabinets and vanities. And that's that's pretty encouraging. It's really fun. I get a lot of DMs from women who are like, should I do this? I'm like, absolutely. Like I think if you've got a dream and you really, if you want to try something out, try it out.
Mhm.
This is the time to do it. And these dads that are building with their daughters, like this is, I think my dad is not a builder. Like, love my dad dearly, but he's a businessman. He is not a builder. My mom probably would have been out in the shop with me when I was a kid if we had been building. Now she does. She actually does come in town and builds and likes to be in the shop, which is so much fun. But it's really fun to get to encourage, to be someone that can say, you know what, I am doing this full time. I'm totally in a man's world at the end of the day. Like, I still feel like I'm in a man's world in the building, which is great. But that it's, that's going to be something that sets me apart from everyone else, is that I mean, I do have guys on staff, but at the end of the day, I'm a female owned and run woodworking business, which is really fun. And so a lot of the carpenter t-shirts, I follow I mean, it's my hashtag that I've got on Instagram and social media, and I follow it, and it's really, really fun, because I would say half of my Instagram feed is just from the hashtag. So it's women all around the world using the carpenter hashtag. And then a lot of times it's dads that are building, like I said, like they're with their daughters, or even like a mom building with their daughter, and they're tagging like little carpenter in the shop. And that just like,
That's cool.
that pulls on the heartstrings. That's pretty cool, that one, that they're using the hashtag, two, that dads are, again, they're showing their daughters videos of me working. It's pretty cool. It's a really cool feeling that I would have never expected that I would be in even 8 years ago.
Now, do you have plans to take that sort of theme and expand on that, and maybe offer, women's classes or
Yes.
training?
Yeah. So we are actually this spring. So it's actually launching on my website, I think the second week of November. We're going to start doing women's workshop weekends, and then father-daughter weekends and mother-daughter weekends. So we'll do 3 of each. So it'll be 9 weekends a year that we'll do, a father-daughter weekend, a mother-daughter, and then a women's workshop. And so they'll all be a little bit different. So we'll kind of have like an intro to woodworking, where women can come in and really just kind of, what tools do they need to buy at the very beginning? There's kind of a list of, like, I think are essential tools if you're going to start woodworking. So buying those essential tools. And then, if it's father daughter or mother daughter, doing a group, like doing a team build. So whether that's building a tray or a birdhouse or something, like, we'll do, depending on what ages that we have, like, we're going to be doing some fun stuff like that. But I am really, really excited that now that I have this shop, I have the ability to have a great environment to build in for women.
And the
That's awesome.
space too.
And the space. Yeah. I mean, we've got, oh, what do we have? We have 5 workbench tables right now in the shop, and I had 2 in my last shop. And so it was really, we have 2 lower ones that are just, I think they're 28 inches off the ground. It's actually, those are our assembly tables. So it's an 8x8 massive table that's where we assemble. Probably 90% of our built-ins and furniture get assembled on that, and then they get moved over. And it was fun because I did a little birdhouse class with all my neighbors' kids. And it was just so fun to have, little kids standing all around the table building. And I could have done it in the last shop, but we would have been so close and confined together, where I actually had kids like spaced out all around the table. And of course, all the parents and grandparents have cameras and they're taking pictures all the way around.
So that would
So
definitely clutter it up very quickly.
yes. Yeah. So at least now with a bigger shop, we've got the space to do it.
So what you're saying is your next room is going to be more like an auditorium with tiered steps and seating,
That
so
makes it
that
neat too.
the family can come and watch,
Hey,
and everything will be down below.
I'll put bleachers in there.
There you go. You can make them pull out like at the old school
That's
gymnasiums,
true. Our
Yeah.
gym had pull out bleachers.
Yeah. So I mean,
That's a good
just right
idea.
now you're creating. I see a 20-year plan out of this now. Shop 2 is going to have the classroom setting with the pull-out bleachers and multiple camera angles, so that all
Yeah.
family can
So
see.
everyone can see.
Large viewing screens for your viewing pleasure, for those who can't see well.
That's right. Yeah, it's
Those
almost like
in the nosebleed section.
I love medical dramas, one of those junkies for TV medical dramas. And I kind of think that is like, they have the big room up top and they're all watching the surgery down below and they've
Mhm.
got all the different cameras. That will happen. That could totally happen in the shop.
How to
Welcome to
build a
Stevie's
birdhouse.
observation room. Yep.
Yes. Did you say a bird nest?
No, how to build a birdhouse with the overhead view.
Yeah. We could actually call it like the builder's nest where the parents sit. That actually would kind of be a cute.
That way we can watch and they can see it all without being right on top of the kids.
Yep. Absolutely.
Welcome, JP. JP asked the very critical question: team chamfer or team roundover for Stevie?
Oh, it depends. It really depends. Right now we're doing a vanity for a client and we totally did a roundover. It just blended well with what we were doing for the doors. But my own personal table that's right there next to me is a chamfer edge. So yeah, it just depends on the builds, but I like both. I really like both.
It's a
Another
running joke
person that
we have.
can't make a decision.
Yeah.
No.
But there are some people it's like you round over everything. Like there is only
no chamfer. Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, that's 100% the right answer as far as it all depends on the build for sure.
Yeah, because it's like for a modern build, like I actually think the chamfer is pretty for a much more of a modern build. And then, like my vanity that I just built for myself, I did what did I do? It was just, it's a tiny chamfer, but I did use my actual router and route it over, but we set that thing to next to nothing, but it looks really pretty.
Let's see. And JP's building a assembly table himself, and he might be going over to team chamfer for that one. He was originally a roundover guy, but hey, again, it's the same thing. It depends on the build.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now I wonder if his workbench, so if it will have there's a couple awesome workbenches that I've seen some people build that have like the dog holes and whatnot on the top. And that was actually one thing that literally yesterday I was thinking about. That's one thing that we did not add on ours. And that's something that I kind of wish that might be an after that we do pretty soon. Bourbon Moth, Jason from Bourbon Moth Woodworking out in Oregon. He's got a really cool builds for his workbench tables. It's got the dog holes on one side, and then he's got like dust collection that's underneath the table that he cleans out pretty regularly. That's my only thing with the drop down is we've got drawers underneath 3 of our tables. And so that's just like an extra layer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can build the real thin, like 1/4-inch dust shields for those.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Yeah. See, I'm in the process now of redoing my bench, but I'm kind of going away from what a lot of people do. I'm completely making it MicroJig.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I've kind of fallen in love with that system. So it's complete slots and track, and it's yeah. So that's the way I'm going with mine.
Yeah. We have one of our tables, I did put every 2 feet. We've got tracks running down. So whenever we do need to clamp anything down and whatnot, like we can run it through the track. I know I'm about to do kind of like the Festool MFT table with the drop down arm for the track saw, so that if we're going to do cross cuts, that's something that I've got a huge Delta RT40 table saw. That's our main workhorse in the shop. I've got 2 other table saws, but that's the saw that gets used the most. And I've got a 28-inch deep crosscut sled that we use quite a bit. But there's been a couple things where I'm like, oh, we need it a little bit wider. And of course, you kind of need a much bigger. So the other day I was like, you know what? This might be an addition to the table, is just adding like the Festool MFT type arm that we could just like do quick cross cuts with the track saw.
Good idea.
And that's the key, is making it right for your shop and what you do. And that's why there's really no one thing that's right for everybody, because it's about, you got to gear it around you and what things work best for you.
Yeah. Now I will say, I do think I think my shop layout is probably top tier. So
Okay.
if you have a little bit of space for, and if like you're any type of production shop, I will say that I think I probably have, I mean, I will toot my own horn. I think I have probably one of the best layouts for production. And then I've actually drawn out, I've actually sent it to a couple other big shops that have asked. They're like, hey, we're watching your videos. We're looking how you've got everything. Cause we've got everything that's creating dust we have on kind of the back end of the shop, and then it flows. So it's like you're creating dust in the back, and then you're next going to the workbench tables, and then you're going to the paint room, and then you're going out to the back door into the trailer. So we really do have like a process that it's set up on. So that's my only thing. I'm like, when people are like, oh, is there anything that you actually think that you've done really well and the stuff? I'm like, yes, my shop list. Only because we rearranged my last shop when I was in the retail space. I think it got, in 4 years, I think it was rearranged 4 or 5 times. So we had set up the shop and like for the first 6 months, it got completely revamped, and then it got revamped in year 2, and then it was stayed the same for the next 2 years, and then my last 6 and 8 months in the shop, we rearranged it twice. And the last time really was because I knew I was going to build the other shop. And so we actually redid space layout in that shop so that I could figure out what needed, like what would actually work. And then whenever we had a big shop, I was able to put things out. So it's pretty set up now.
No, it's a good thing. I think being in that smaller space, you had to be very mindful of every bit of the process, because you didn't have like I mean, you had a people door, but you didn't really have a garage door for large pieces in the front. So everything was in and out the back.
Yep, exactly. And, it's like, that was the other thing. It's like, you kind of learn too. It's like, you can't always build massive things. Like that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned when I started doing built-ins about 5 years ago, was that sure, like you could build a 60-inch by 40-inch piece, but how wide is it? Like, like, are you, it's 40 inches deep, but can you get it out that door? Like, can you actually get it out of a door without having to take it all apart? And then whenever you get to a client's house, they don't have big doors. And so like you're having to come through doors. That was probably one of the biggest learns building built-ins, was build things in pieces. Unless it's a dining room table that I can actually, like, we can flip up and carry in and then attach the legs there. But majority of the time, everything's built a little bit smaller so we can get it in and out of doors. Because there is nothing worse than building something and then trying to get up a set of stairs and it does not fit.
Oh yeah.
It's only happened 1 or 2 times.
Yeah, well,
That's all it needs.
I worked for a cabinet shop one time, and we went to do the install. Well, the guy that designed it completely forgot that aspect.
Yeah.
And it was a huge cabinet. We couldn't even get it up the stairs and make the turn at the stairs. We ended up having to get with the contractor and have them take out 2 sets of windows in the very front of the house. We hoisted it up on the truck, on the delivery truck, back the truck up, and then hoisted it up in through those windows. Oh, it was a nightmare.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, that's how, like, I've seen some of those builds, like, I've seen cranes come in and drop off things, or like the fork that's coming up and dropping it over on the second floor. That's wild. I did build a cabinet. Well, it was like a window seat, but the stairway was a straight 90-degree turn. And we tried everything to get that thing up, and there was no having it. So I ended up having to take it back to the shop, and you can't just cut it in 2 and, glue it back together. So it was taking the whole thing apart, building it in 2 separate units, and then coming back and then putting, a seamless piece across the top. But it took that one time was my big lesson. And thankfully it was early on. So
yeah, it's all about design when you're there at the house, is to make sure that whatever you build is going to fit through their door too.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So,
Well,
and that's actually, I have to ask every client, like, is this going to fit? Do you have any walls or doors? If I haven't been to their house yet, like that could be a real buster.
Yeah. Well, you build mostly framed cabinets, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the nice thing about that is you could potentially make a series of frameless cabinets,
Hmm.
bring them in, and then just plaster the frame on there as needed. So
Yeah. Yep. We have done that. We've done that quite a bit. Now I'm kind of I like the staggering. So I do a lot of staggering face framing. So it kind of all gets hidden behind and people don't realize there's, there's like 4 pieces behind that.
mhm.
So, but we have everything's labeled. Like on the back, we literally have like 1A, 2A.
It's how you got to do it, though. You got to label it.
You do. So everything is labeled, triple checked, taped, sharpied off.
No, I have to do that whenever doing kitchen cabinets. I always make sure, especially with like the European style hinges,
Mm-hmm.
I label every single hinge into the door it goes to, because I don't want to readjust all those again. Like once they're adjusted
Yeah.
and they're installed, they're good, but you don't want to do that
Yep.
twice.
Mhm.
No, you really don't. That's what we have the rule too. Like in the shop, we do as much as we possibly can in the shop. So whenever we go do an install, we're pretty much just installing. We're not having to make much adjustments. I mean, of course, things are going to happen, but yeah, we will label everything. So whenever we walk into, a client's house, we're about to start a project, there is blue tape on everything because it is all labeled. So I always tell clients, I'm like, don't walk in halfway through because you're not going to know it's not going to look pretty. I'm like, my favorite thing is to tell the client sees it. They see the empty room. They see us start carrying things in and they come back, a handful of hours later and it's completely finished. And they're like, oh, like, yep, this is what I like you to see.
Yeah. That's okay to watch us move in, but don't watch us while we're there.
Oh no, I will tell clients to leave. Like I will. Like it puts pressure on me and my team whenever someone's sitting on the couch, eating popcorn, just watching.
Yeah. They want their real life HGTV.
Yes. And I'm like, I get it. I like to watch HGTV too, but I don't want you watching me.
That I always found it opens the door for questions. Like they feel like,
yes,
they want to ask you, oh, well, why are you doing that? And it's like, right now's not the time, but
right now is not the time. Yep. I actually did have that. I was on a 10-foot ladder installing some floating shelves that went up, above some built-ins. And I had a client come in and I'm literally like I'm on a 12-foot ladder. So I'm 10 feet up tall as the top shelf. And I'm on the ladder and I'm about to like start drilling in and he comes in and starts asking questions. And I look down, I'm like looking down at him. I'm like, hey, I would love to answer that question, but right now is not the time. Let me finish this and get hopped down the ladder and I'll come talk to you.
Nope. It happens. And that's part of it.
Yep.
Ever been hit by a drill from 10 feet up in the air? Yeah, you might want to leave or you'll find out what that's like.
Yep. I installed my own dust collection last year and I had one of the pipes come off and hit me and I busted my eye open, on a 12-foot ladder. That was real great.
That's not fun.
No, I was lucky. Actually, that was my parents were visiting. My mom was there in the shop, like whenever it happened. And I, thankfully I didn't fall off the ladder because that would have been a pretty far fall. But I made after that happened, I actually made a rule like for my shop that no one can get up on like the big 10-foot ladder unless someone else is in the shop. Cause I'm like, if anything happens, like make sure that someone's there.
Yeah. Especially that high up. Cause that's time is crucial.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And I have a concrete floor. So if you fall, you're getting busted.
Yeah. That'll stop real quick.
Yeah.
Well, Stevie, I want to thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your schedule. I know that you're busy. You got install stuff going on. So I want to thank you for joining Klingspor's Woodworking Shop for our woodworking extravaganza, talking about women in woodworking and your carpenter movement.
Absolutely. Well, I love you guys. You guys have been so great. I love Klingspor. You guys take good care of me and I love the stuff and I love you guys. So thank you for having me.
Nope. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you want to stick around, you're more than welcome to, because we have Ralph Bagnal coming up with MicroJig. So it's all up to you. But so we'll bring in Mr. Ralph now. How you doing, Ralph?
I'm doing well. How y'all doing?
Doing fine, sir.
Well, I was listening to the last part of that conversation. It was a lot of fun. And I'm shaking my head and smiling back here. You couldn't see me, but you're talking about cranes lifting stuff in. And we built years ago when I was working in the stair business, we built a 530-degree turn stair, 1.5 revolutions going up 2 floors. And the only way to get it into the house was to lift it in. They had to pull the top off of what looked like a silo, but was made out of glass. This was like the super high-end home on the coast. And we had to lower it in using a crane. It was the only way to get it in.
That's crazy.
You were talking about, not fitting things in. The number of stairs that we would send out, only to find out that since we had been there to measure, like they had put up new walls.
Oh.
It just, everything you were talking about, I was just laughing because I've been there, done that. And it's like, and the worst part is you do cabinets, which is what I grew up doing. And you're one of the last contractors in there. So first of all, you have no control over what the site looks like when you get there. Electrical and plumbing is never where it's supposed to be.
Oh,
and then, and then everybody else has been delayed going along, but everybody expects that you're going to be finishing up the job on time, even though you didn't get in for like a week late. It's brutal out there. It is brutal. That's why, everything done in the shop that can possibly be done in the shop is the only way to work.
Yeah.
I hate being in the field.
Oh my gosh. We got to a kitchen build. This is last April. And they had moved whenever I had gone over and taken initial, measurements for where the sink was going to go, where the dishwasher was going to go. And I had spaced out cabinets. So we weren't going to have, any lines where any of the plumbing or electrical is. Not even kidding you. On the one back wall, not one thing that we had taken measurements for was there. It had all been moved. And I ended up having to rebuild 2 pieces completely just to fit where the outlets and the water were coming up for like the sink alone. I was like, this is, we walked in there and we started putting the one wall in. And as we put the corner piece in and we were about to wrap around that wall. I looked at it, I was like, this doesn't look right. This is not, and I always have my my clipboards with me. And so I've got my clipboard of the drawing and I've got, this is 36 inches from that. That's not 36 inches.
It's horrible. I've been there so many times. I'm so glad I'm out of that game now. I get to do product development for
now you get to do
products. So I'm having a ball.
We love I'm going to hop off because I'm going to go back out, but we love MicroJig. We've got a couple that we're using on the planer right now. Actually, one got sent, not through the planer. One got sent through the joiner. One of the little foot tips hit the joiner the other day. I was like,
write down my email. It's Ralph@MicroJig. Drop me a line. I'll get you what you need.
All right. All sounds good. Guys, you're awesome. I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Hey, nice talking with you, Stevie.
You too, Ralph.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing good.
How you doing?
Well, that's great to hear. I'm ready to start rocking and rolling. Hopefully we have a bunch of people on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out and just tell everybody that I've got a presentation here and we got some time to do it. If people have questions as we're going along, you guys too, if you want to go ahead and express them, that's great. But if the audience wants to, comment in the comment section, I've got that up as well. I can see it. I love having the interaction during the program. Mm-hmm. If you wait until the end, it's like nobody wants to stick around for the questions and you forget. So we've got the time built in. Let people, please ask away. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Okay. And we'll see if that actually works. Let's see. Share screen. Easiest with 2 monitors. No, I don't have 2 monitors, but that's okay. We'll share the screen.
It's the easiest.
All right. Let's see if I can call this up. Maybe I can't do it that way. All right. Can you see the screen now?
Not yet.
Okay. It should say build beautiful frames from your scrap box.
Let's see. If you do share, screen share, then you have entire screen, window, or tab.
Okay. Let me see. Share. Oh, that's okay. Wait a minute. That's why. Okay.
There
Stop sharing. I got it.
It went away.
Yeah. Hang on. Share screen. All right. And then I want to do window. That's what I want. And then I got to call up the window I want, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me get to the window I want. Oh, sorry, guys. Anybody who's watching this is how it happens when it's live.
That's right. And it's okay because right now you can shop at woodworkingshop.com, 15% off on abrasives, 30% off on books, including Ralph's new CNC book.
Thank you.
And then 15% off select safety gear and 10% off most everything else at woodworkingshop.com or call us at 800-228-0000.
Let's see.
See what
Slideshow.
technical difficulty. We got right through that. No problem.
All right. Now, see, that's the problem. I'm escape. Trying to set up the slideshow.
Is it a file?
It's a PowerPoint, but I want to be able to control it and talk at the same time. Oh, well, there we go. And let's see if I can do that. No, still trying to take over my entire screen here. Let's see.
It's okay if it, I mean, it's for us, it's okay if it does, because what I'm going to do
All
is
right,
bring
so
it up.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through, I'm going to share my entire screen. I'm going to run through that. And then you guys, if anybody pops up with a question on the comments or whatever, please just let me know and read it out. And
Sure.
you guys can ask questions as we go, and we'll do it that way.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to share the entire screen, and I'm going to hit share here. Oh, come on. Why is that not sharing? There we go. Share. And you can see my entire screen now, which looks weird because it's like Inception, but I will fix that in just a second as I call up.
Oh, look at all that awesome research and development on his desktop.
Yeah, no kidding. No, I'm very careful with nothing on my desktop that shouldn't be seen. All right, so we're going to go to slideshow and start from the beginning. You should now see.
Yep.
Mhm.
All right, build beautiful frames from your scrap box.
Absolutely. We see it.
All right, so so basically this is called my, let's go ahead and click. This project actually started out in 2007. It was a project I wrote for, a project plan I wrote for Woodcraft magazine, sorry. And my wife had come home with this commercial frame she had bought at a store somewhere. Guys, we've all done this, right? Your wife or your significant other comes home and says, "Can you make this?" And so, but I looked at it and I really liked the design, but the way that they had manufactured it in the factory was like wildly complex. So I kind of simplified it into just half laps. But what I love about this project is the corners are double half lapped. Can you see my cursor moving around at all?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. The corners are double half laps. So this entire frame, first of all, is made out of 8 relatively small sticks of wood, and the double half laps eliminate all the miters. So making these frames is really easy. It's really simple, and it's a great way to get an awesome looking frame without having to fight with filling the gaps on your miters or making sure they're square or anything else. And it's been a great project. You know, there's loads of design ideas that I'll be sharing with you. And by the way, there is a PDF plan of this project that I've given to Klingspor. And so you Klingspor customers can get it from them so that you can build your own. It's all going to be totally free. So I think Mike will let you know how that happens at some point. I'm not exactly sure.
No, I think what we did was we put on any of the MicroJig tools, there's a link to building this or getting this PDF.
Oh, cool.
From there.
Okay. So, so that's awesome. So the double half laps eliminate the need for the miters. And the cool part is because it's all thin strips, you can make it out of a lot of scrap. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. So originally I had, to do the half laps, I had built a jig that worked on your miter gauge for your saw. And that worked pretty well, but it was, you know, it was a little bit more complicated to build. And when MicroJig came out with the dado stop, I went ahead and reworked the plans to work with the dado stop. And that's what we're going to look at today. So this is an excellent way to use your scraps up. And as you can see here, I've got a piece of walnut that was cut out for something, probably on the CNC actually. And this is part of the web that came off. Normally you wouldn't be able to use that scrap, but of course we're using the grippers here. So we can rip those thin strips out of whatever weirdness you've got hanging around. And I went to the MicroJig shop scrap box and pulled a bunch of pieces out to cut up for this project. So I left the blade down too low there. So basically, that's one of the beauty parts of the gripper is it allows you to do these thinner rips safely, easily, cleanly. That's a piece of maple we're ripping. There's no burning. There's no tool marks. These things are ready to rock right off the saw as long as you're using a good blade. And we can adjust to whatever size stock we're working with. It's a really nice way to work. It's safe. It's effective. It's just a really, the gripper really is the only way I do rip cuts in my shop anymore. So we're using up the scrap that's laying around in the shop to make the pieces for the frame. And we'll click. All right. So we ripped all the pieces. Now, these are 5/8 by 5/8 that I'm working with here. And I ripped all the pieces once, but now I've got to turn them, flip them over onto their side, and we're going to rip them a second time. And again, this is where the gripper comes in. Now, in this case, it's a longer piece, so I'm going to use 2 grippers to do the same cut, but it's because it's a longer piece, I can use them hand over hand, very similar. I got to adjust the thing again, the blade, but very similar to using push blocks on the jointer. So we're going to do a hand over hand, and you can rip long strips as long as you want to that way without pausing in the middle. So you eliminate those tool marks and those burns. Mm-hmm. So now the parts get flipped over on their sides, and we're going to take the second rip. And again, adjusting. Once we adjust here, all these pieces should be 5/8 thick now, top to bottom, because we've already ripped them once. So now we're just going to rip them until they're square. I think I just played the same thing twice. Here, let me double check and make sure. Yes, I did. All right, so now we're ripping the strips the second time. So you can see I'm checking to see which way is the 5/8. And once the gripper's set up, I can just, in this case, I'm just shaving off a little bit, but I think the next piece is that hunk of maple that we played with earlier. So one setup, and I can just keep ripping strips until I'm ready to go. So again, this is an awesome way to use up some of the scraps that you have laying around your shop, some of those odd pieces. And the other thing that's really fun about this, I'll show you that all the setup is going to be done from, or all the pieces can be made from one setup. So this image here is actually from the plans. The size of your artwork is going to determine what the length of the pieces that make up the top, the sides, and the ends of the frame are, obviously. But I've given you a chart here to work off of. So depending on the thickness of the stock that you're working with and the way that the frame is built, we're going to look at 2 different ways with one, a square frame that's, flush on all 4 edges. And then the other one, we're going to have what I call a crenellated corner, where the half laps actually extend beyond each side of the frame. So you get kind of a mission look out of it. But I give you this drawing, this measured drawing in the plans. So you can take the artwork being, let's say 8 by 10 and either add, 1.875 to that or 2.5, whatever it is, so that you can get accurate measurements for the artworks you want to do without having to guess at it or figure it out yourself. So because the half laps are referenced from the ends, I can cut all my stock to length first. And with one setup, I can cut a piece that's 8 inches long, 10 inches long, 12 inches long, 16 inches long. It doesn't matter. I can cut all the pieces I need for several different size frames out of one setup, which makes it really easy to make a whole bunch of, let's say, I don't know, Christmas gifts in your shop in one setup. So this is a great project for Christmas, because I don't know anybody who doesn't have, some artwork hanging around their house that they've been meaning to hang up or to frame. And this is a great way to do it and use your scraps as you go. The other thing is, you're going to see me in this session cutting everything into roughly square pieces, 5/8 on a side, but they don't have to be. You can actually cut the strips to different depths, front to back. So if you wanted to do something that was more of a shadow box, or you wanted a couple of mats, you can go a little bit deeper to accommodate the artwork without changing these dimensions looking at it from the front. So now we're going to cut the strips to length. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. So here I'm trimming the end because it is scrap. And then I'm using the dado stop as a crosscut stop on my rip fence. It's really good for that. But you also have the ability to trim the end and, use your miter gauge to set the cut that way. Whichever one you want to use works. You can even use your miter saw or whatever else. We just need to cut all the stock to the lengths that you need according to the chart we just looked at, the drawing we looked at previously. I usually just sit down and I'll make up a list of I need 4 of this, 8 of that, 12 of the other, and then I can just start with my longer stock to cut the longer pieces and work down through. That way, if something happens, I can use I might have a scrap longer piece that can be cut into something a little bit shorter. Oh, see there, I did it again. I clicked on the video instead of the thing. So we're going to use the dado stop over here from MicroJig to cut the half laps or the dados that form the half laps. And so there's 2 ways to set up the dado stop. When it originally came out, we used a manual setup feature, and I'm going to show you that first because I'm also going to show you how to use it with a dado blade. And this is the setup you would use to do that. But I'm also going to show after that we have a setup gauge that can be either purchased separately or it comes with the Dado Stop Pro Kit, which makes setting up the Dado Stop a lot faster and easier. But we're going to start out doing a manual setup. And the beauty part about the Dado Stop is we're going to be able to cut our dados just using our regular saw blade. If you don't have a dado set in your shop yet, you can still make these cuts because we're going to use the actual saw blade to start with. So the first thing I'm going to do is clamp a piece of scrap to my miter gauge because I need to locate, in this case, the left side of the blade. So I'm going to clamp a piece of scrap and I'm going to cut it off. That face on the clamped piece represents the left side of my blade. Now when the blade comes down, spins down, unplug, or in this case, I had shut off the saw stop. Then we're going to bring the dado stop over, attached to the rip fence, and the center leg, the number 1 leg, we're going to adjust until it's just barely in contact with the blade, not pushing the blade out of the way. And you'll see me turning the blade backward. You can hear it when it touches. So now we've got that set. Now we're going to bring the center part over, and I'm going to pause this for a second. So what I just did, oops, let me see if I can, okay, right here. This face that we just cut is representing the left side of the blade. The number 1 leg we brought over and we're touching is representing the right side of the blade. So right now, the number 2 leg is movable and we brought it out so that it's actually the difference between 2 and 1 is in fact the thickness of my blade, the kerf that it's going to cut, which we need to know as we cut our half lap. And I'll show you that. And I'm not hearing anything. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to check because I got my whole screen open here. All right. So this process, what we just went through, is basically determining what the kerf is that our blade's going to cut, which we'll need to know as we go forward. So now, once I've set that, I can take this away from the blade, out of the way where I can work a little bit. And now I'm going to bring a square in. And I could have used an actual square, but in this case, oh, no, that's the next slide. All right. So now I'm going to bring a square in. And this is the setup gauge, but we're using it as a square. And now the number 3 leg gets adjusted so that we're accounting for the width of the stock. Now the piece that I used here, that I just set the number 3 to, is one of the parts. It's actually the part that I want to go into the groove I'm about to cut. So what we're doing is we're not measuring anything, we're not marking. These parts are roughly 5/8, but I cut that basically off of my rip fence scale. So they might be several thousandths larger or smaller. Doesn't matter. We're not going by measurements. We're going by the gauge that we just set the gauge, the dado stop, to the actual part. Now, The part here that we're working with is we've got 3 legs. So number 1 was the inside of our blade. Number 2 is the outside, the far side of our blade. And number 3 is the distance from the far side of the blade to the width of the, so this is the width of the stock between 2 and 3. But when we cut the shoulder, you'll see that we're going to use both sides of the blade. We'll cut one of the shoulders of the groove. So we need to account for the blade. And that's why we're going to cut from 1 and 2. Let me show you the process. Oops. Oh, wait a minute. Before we cut the groove, the next step is we need to find the halfway point of our stock. Again, we could use a height gauge. We could do a lot of things, but I'm going to show you a trick here. I've set the blade slightly below the halfway point of the wood. I'm going to make 1 cut from one side, 1 cut from the other side. This is a piece of leftover scrap. And then, but it has to be the same size. But notice if I keep taking cuts from each face and just keep raising the blade a little bit at a time, when the second pass cuts all the way through the stock, I found the center. So if you didn't catch it, that's the trick. So you're going to start with a piece, start with your blade a little bit below the center line. You're going to make 1 pass. Then we're going to make a second pass. Same cut. And in this case, there's a little bit of a gap. So we're not quite at the halfway point. Bring the blade up a little bit more. Make 2 passes again. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4, but in this case, that's pretty close. And actually, if you're doing a half lap like this, you do want to make it just a whisker over deep because you need a little bit of room for the glue. All right, so now we're going to cut the half lap. The frame on the cover, we have double half laps here, but we can also do as I showed you earlier, not having these crenellations. So the outer piece would actually be a rabbet, not a half lap. But we're going to start with the half lap so you can see the whole process. But again, these can be any length we want them to be, and we can make them whatever species we want them to be. As you get bigger with your pictures, I like 5/8 by 5/8. As you can see, for an average size image, it works as a good size. But sometimes if you're looking at a bigger poster, you may want to have a thicker stock so the frame doesn't look spindly. So now we've got our dado stop set up, and we're going to actually cut the half lap. Now the dado stop is 3 inches from the middle leg. The center fixed leg is 3 inches to the rip fence. So we just have to account for that when we set the gap. If I go backwards, let's see. Shift click. Nope. All right. I'm going to escape for a second here. I'm going to go back 1, back a few, and from current slide. Okay. So here, this can be a 1/2 inch. It can be 5/8. I like to make this overhang on the corners the same as the thickness of the stock. And then we're going to make the gap in between the two the same as the thickness. And that way you get a really pleasant look. But you can kind of lay these things out any way you like. Sometimes it's just all a matter of aesthetics. But in this case, we're going to set for 5/8. So here, I'm going to set the dado stop for 3 5/8, or the rip fence. So my first cut, the blade is going to cut at 5/8 in from the edge of the stock. Now, the weird part is we spent a lot of time setting up leg 2, but we're not going to use it. That was just there to set leg 3. We're going to cut the first cut off leg 1. The second shoulder is cut off leg 2. And now we're just going to use our blade to nibble away the middle, whatever's in between. You can see I missed a little piece there. And I'm going to take the piece over here that I used to set the jig up, and it's a nice tight fit right there. You can pick it up, and it's not coming out on its own. So that's a perfect half lap. And there was no measuring, no marking, no test cuts. That setup procedure that we looked at gives you that kind of a joint. Now, the blade you want to use here, obviously we're going to want this bottom of the half lap to be nice and flat. So in this case, I'm using a combo blade because we're going across the grain. I would use a crosscut blade, but those are almost always alternating top bevel blades, which would leave a little V behind at the bottom of the groove. This is an ATB-R. So it's every fifth tooth is a raker. So it's a flat top tooth. So this leaves a very nice flat bottom, considering that you're making a number of cuts with a standard blade. And here's the procedure again. Now, once we've set this up and we start cutting, we're going to cut both ends of each piece that are made up in the frame. So there's 8 pieces here. And if I were doing a bunch of frames, all the stock would get cut with this setup for the type of frame that has the protrusions on the ends. So go through and do all that cutting at once with one setup and, get all your stock cut. But again, notice we're working off leg 1 and see how that first cut, the right side of the groove is the right side of the blade, left side of the groove is the left side of the blade as you're standing there as the operator. And then the second groove, other way around. So but we cut the 2 sides of the groove and we're working off both sides of the blade. That's why we had to go through the procedure of setting the width of the blade, because we have to account for it. If we tried to cut, working off of one side of the blade, our groove would be an 1/8 inch too wide. So that's why we have the 3 legs and we have to do the 2 measurements. But it works out really well and you get a nice flat bottom. So for frames with flush edges like this, and we're going to see this in a minute, these are actually rabbet cuts on the end. They're not dados. So we're going to take that 3-inch offset that the dado stop is. We're going to set the rip fence to 1/8 of an inch to 3 inches. And so our first cut is going to be right on the end of the board. And then we're going to cut in from the end. Now notice on this one, this is a couple of the variations that you can see in the plans. This one, we've got the corner is flush, the second one, but then the outer stick is extended a little bit. It was just a variation I did. You have to be a little bit more careful about your setups, but basically it's the same thing. It's just, marking your parts and keeping them in order. So here we're going to cut that rabbet. I'm going to readjust. So I'm just bringing my rip fence over to 0. I've got my scale accurately set to this blade. And so now my first cut is still going to come off leg 1, but it's really just the end of the board. Probably don't have to do that, touch leg 1 at all, but it just makes it easier so you don't miss things. And then I'm just going to work over until my last cut is referenced off of leg 3, and that's going to give me a perfectly sized rabbet on the end. It's the same width as the stock that I used to set the dado stop. So the dado stop makes these kind of half laps really, really convenient and easy to make.
Now, with this unique design, you could potentially even make this more like a weave. Correct?
You could.
Yeah.
I've seen people use I've seen people do 3 instead of 2 sticks on each side. They did 3 or 4 for larger frames. I've seen guys actually make like trivets this way. Mm-hmm. It's a really, really interesting way to make things that have square corners without doing miters. So I like this technique a lot. And yeah, there's almost no limitation to what you can do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reset for the second cut. Now, in this case, we're going from 3 because we have to account, or 0 plus the 3 for the setup gauge or the dado stop. Now, in this case, I've got 5/8 here, and I want a 5/8 gap between the 2 dados. So here I've offset the rip fence by an extra 1.25 inches. So right now the rip fence is set to 4 1/4, and that's going to give me that second cut I want. The nice thing is you're always referencing off the outside of the board, the far end, so you don't have to account for the width of the groove you're working with. All of the dimensions that you're setting your rip fence to are going to be relative to the end of the board. It makes the whole setup process much, much easier to deal with. And so in both cases, whether you're using the rabbet end or the dado end, you just adjust by the dimension that you need to. This one, obviously, we have to have an extra 5/8 in our measurement because we started 5/8 to the left or to the right. But as long as you keep track, I always recommend, if you're going to do this, take a few minutes and zero out your rip fence scale to your blade that you're using. It's just going to make your life easier for all of the math you have to do and all of the movement. I can do everything off the rip scale without having to put a straight edge across here and possibly have some variation. So now, oh, okay, sorry. It looked very similar. One of the problems, let me go back. I don't know how to go back. Right click, previous, there we go. Okay, so one of the problems with this method though, as we start working it, and you guys may have picked up on this already, this is an 1/8" blade. We're cutting 5/8 grooves here. That means that the minimum, if I did my work perfectly, each one of these half laps takes 5 passes. And the reality is more like 6 or 7, as you can see. 3, 4, 5, 6. And there are 4 of these half laps on every stick, and there's 8 sticks. That's a lot of passes. So one of the cool things is that the dado stop can actually work with a dado blade. The number 2 leg, that's the one we use to measure the width of the kerf we're cutting, that can actually extend out past number 1 by 13/16 of an inch, or equivalent to a full dado stack. To set the width of our stock is 13/16 behind the number 1 leg. So again, accommodating that full cut. So when you're using the dado stop, and one of the questions I get a lot is, how wide a cut can it make? How wide a dado can I make? Your dado is, the maximum you can do is 13/16 plus the thickness of your actual blade. So with the 1/8" blade we were using previously, we could make up to a 15/16 wide dado. But with using the dado stack, we could do up to 1 5/8 inches because we got 13 and 13/16. So in this case, I'm going to use a 3/8" dado stack right here, because by using the 3/8", it's less than the width of my groove, but it's more than half. So I'll be able to make this cut in 2 passes. But going back to what I said earlier, this is why I showed you the manual setup method, because we have to use that for this dado stack, because whatever dado stack I set up, I'm going to start by trimming a piece just like I did before, leave it clamped to my miter gauge, wait for the blade to stop. Now I'm going to bring the dado stop over until it's just barely touching the blade, the edge of the tooth, to the number 1 leg. Once you get it so that it's just barely touching, you lock it in, everything in place, and then you can bring your part forward and set the number 2 leg. Now notice that number 2 leg is sticking out by 3/8 of an inch, the width of that blade. So that lets me set everything up. The rest of the setup is the same. Now we're going to use the square. And again, we're measuring basically right now, what we're setting is the distance from the outside of the groove we want to cut to the inside of the groove we want to cut. And since we're using the part that's going into the groove, we'll always get the accurate result. So the fun part about using the dado blade is now I'm going to make this cut in 2 passes. Right side, or left side, you're done. Spin it around. Right side, left side, complete. So basically in 17 seconds, I cut both halves rather than, taking 20 or 30 seconds to cut each one. So it saves a lot of time doing this. And the trick is, when you're using the dado stop with a dado blade, I always set up my dado stack. I don't have to use shims. I can just put whatever spacers I need to set up for a cut that's a little bit more than half the cut I want to make. That way, I don't want to try and do it all in one because I want to be able to control. I'm letting the dado stop control the locations of the two shoulders. But by taking at least half the width in one pass, I only need 2 passes to make each cut. So it saves a ton of time, especially when you're making a lot of frames like this. All right. We also have the setup gauge. And this is what I'm going to show you now. Normally, this is how I set up my dado stop if I'm using if I'm just cutting one half lap, like for a piece of furniture, I can use just the blade that's in my saw and use the dado stop. So what we show you with the setup gauge is you're going to use your saw and your blade to cut a groove or a notch in the setup gauge right here. So you can see it says trim kerf here. That part is molded in, and we show you how to cut it away using your blade on your saw so that the distance that's from that cut to the factory edge is now the width of your kerf. And so you're going to use that to set your number 2 leg. So you don't have to go through the process of clamping a piece of scrap and cutting it off and doing the manual setup. That number 2 leg, number 1 to 2 leg, is automatically set using the setup gauge. The only drawback to this is it is accurate only for this blade and this saw, whichever one you use to cut it with. But now we're going to go back and use the setup gauge like a square again. We're going to set our number 3 leg the same way, but I've just set up the dado stop without using my miter gauge, without making a cut. You can literally set this up off the saw and get a good result. It's also more consistent because we're not worried about, making sure that how hard you touch the blade to the number 1 leg when we were doing the original setup. If it's a little harder this time and a little less firm next time, you might get a slightly different result. This is very, very consistent, which is why we came up with that. The reason I showed you the more difficult way initially was so that you would understand how to set up a dado blade. But this is the more efficient way if you're going to use your regular saw blade. All right, so we've cut our joints. Now we get to put them together. And I'm just going to do a dry fit here so you can see how it goes together. These are pretty nice, snug fits. And the more of these joints you have going together, it gets a little harder to align things. But as you can see, I use different colors so you could clearly see if there were any gaps, and there are not. And look at how it holds together. There's no glue there. That's just press fit. So it gives you a really nice joint, and it's just a really cool way to work. It's always a good, when I do the actual live Klingspor extravaganza, please let it be next year. This is always a really popular demo that I do at the shows. So now we're going to talk about the glue up. It's really generally very easy. Now, normally I'd glue this up and then sand it all down, but you can actually sand it before you glue it. It usually is that tight. But the stub tendons are easy to glue because all we have to do, they hold each other together completely. All we need to do is clamp from the top down. With the flush cuts, it's a little bit more difficult because we have to make sure that these pieces are tight in as well as being held down. So it requires a little more clamping, but that's not that big a deal. It's pretty easy clamping either way. Notice we've not worried about the rabbit for the artwork yet. We're going to glue this together first. So here I'm just using some spring clamps to hold it all together for the crenellated ones. And for the flush frame, I'm going to use one of you was talking about the MicroJig system, or the match fit system. Here we're using the match fit clamps on a clamping table, and I'm using the X pads to push those pieces in toward each other. And then this block of MDF is just holding all 8 pieces firmly down on the table together at the same time, just to make sure everything's nice and flush. Once the glue dries, you can run over the face of this with a random orbit sander, touch the edges just to make sure everything's clean, and you're ready to rock. Oops, ready to do that. Now we got to cut the rabbit. And for this job, because you could cut the rabbits ahead of time, this is a lot safer and easier, I think. It's all glued together now. It's a rigid piece. I'm going to use a pair of grippers to hold the parts. And we're just going to use a rabbiting bit. in this case, set to 1/4 of an inch deep and 1/4 of an inch from the bearing to the edge. And I'm just going to run it around the inside of the opening and rabbet the 4 sides. Very easy. No, there's very little setup here. All you got to do is set the height of your rabbeting bit and make sure that you're using the proper bearing, and you can cut it out. The only drawback to this method is that it will leave rounded corners on the inside, and we're going to have to chop those out. So that's the next step. Whoops. And that's really just, this is a skill everybody should have. Okay. A good set of bench chisels and a mallet, and get yourself used to being able to chop out corners like this, because it's something you're going to do all the time for mortise and tenons, for frames, for, there's lots of times when you're going to use a router bit or a drill bit to remove most of the waste and then want to square it up with a chisel. And this is the fast and easy way to do it. It looks like it takes a lot of time, but once you get used to doing it, it's very, very quick. So take a few minutes, square up your corners. Now your glass, your artwork, and your backer are all going to fit nice and neat inside your rabbet that's on the back of the picture frame. And then finally, you got to put some kind of hanger on here. Now, when I was originally, and if you in the plan, you'll see that I use a keyhole bit. And notice what I've got set up here, just to make it easy on myself. I've got a gap in the frame here, so the bit fits inside that gap. Pardon me. So that's good. But I don't want the thing to move side to side, so I've put a stop block on my router table fence on each side, and I've got the fence set so that I'm just going to push this frame up to the fence. But instead of using a keyhole bit here, I'm actually using our dovetail bit, because it'll give you a dovetail-shaped groove. And I very carefully set this not to cut all the way through. But the dovetail groove will hold onto a screw head that goes into it and not let it fall off, but it also will act as a hanger. So a keyhole is fine. I just thought, since I'm working in the MicroJig shop, it was easy to just grab a dovetail bit and use that. I would put one of these, by the way, unless you know which way you're going to hang this frame. If you're giving it as a gift, put one on the long side and one on the short side as well. And that way, whoever you're giving it to can hang it either way. But so that's it. And then really, it's just a matter of putting your glazing in, your artwork, a cardboard backer, and using some glazer points pressed into the back, and presto changeo, you've got a frame. And notice here, this is the keyhole bit that I used to cut that hanging slot. So it's the same thing as using the dovetail bit. So one of the cool things about this frame, as we discussed earlier, is there's a lot of potential for interesting things. We've got the flush edges. Here, I actually cut some pyramid caps and glued them into the opening in between. And then here, I used a contrasting wood, but instead of making a pyramid cap, I made a cap that's slightly shallower than the depth of the frame. So that's a nice little detail. This one, I sanded and I prepped it really carefully, and then I lacquered it in black. So it's got a really oriental theme look to it. And then this is the one that you saw earlier where I had the outside pieces were cut a little bit shorter than the inside pieces so that you get this two-step effect. There's almost no limit except your imagination to how you can play these through. So there's lots of, choosing different woods. And like here, we use cherry on the inside and walnut on the outside. There's a lot of different things you can do to make this unique to your decor, to your gift giving, to the person you're presenting it to, whatever you want to do. It's really up to your imagination. And all of this came out of our scrap box. So that's what I've got. I'll be willing to answer questions and chat with you guys and whatever else we need to do. Let me see if I can find you again. There y'all are.
We're in there somewhere.
All right. Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
I'm back.
Thank you for that. That was that was very in depth, and I've always kind of been interested in the dado stop with the match fit system. So now I understand it a little bit better as far as you have to cut with your blade and your saw to really make it perfect.
Well, yes, with that setup gauge with the dado stop. Yes. It's interesting when I travel around the country doing shows, I bring a bunch of those with me because each different show, I cut one so that I can show it off. But then it's useless to me after that because I'm on a different saw with a different blade every day. So but in your shop, you can also, I regularly use Freud has that, their S-Box 8 blade, which is, if you put them together this way, they're a quarter. If you put them together this way, they're 3/8. I use the 3/8 setup on that quite often as I was here. And so I've actually got one of those setup gauges that I used with that 3/8 blade. So now I don't have to do that setup manually. I can do it anytime I want to. I can set up for it. So yeah, you can buy those individually and set them up for your favorite blade or dado combinations as well.
That's good. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and those are very handy not only for setting up the dado stop, but if you are into the MicroJig match fit system, it does have the layouts and setup gauges for your dovetail and your clearing bit as well.
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And so that's a really cool thing. One of the things I like to do is, and when I was asked to do this to this show, I chose this particular project because it does use the gripper, it does use the dado stop, and it gave me a chance to explain those tools, but in a context so that everybody would better understand. It's always easier. I can remember, sitting in geometry classes in high school going, when am I ever going to use this? And then, now I'm a woodworker and I use it every day. But, when my daughter was in school and she was like, Dad, I don't get this, geometry thing. I said, okay, well, you've been asking to paint your room. So I'll tell you what, we'll figure out the area of your walls so that you can figure out how much paint I have to buy. If you get it right, I'll paint your room. But putting it in that context, now all of a sudden the length times the height, it gives it context and it makes sense. So, and when I came in earlier and I was waiting, I was thrilled to hear you say how much you love the match fit system because, yeah, I do too. It's the thing I love about it is I don't buy T-Track anymore.
That's what he was
especially with when I'm doing jigs and fixtures that I know are only going to be throwaways. I can put hardware in, I can put clamps in, and I don't worry about throwing away an expensive piece of T-Track. There are times when I do still use T-Track, don't get me wrong, but I buy a whole lot less of it than I used to.
Yeah, the one thing that I was going to mention that really would be handy is if you guys ever made a double fixture piece. What I mean by that is there was a couple of cases where I've needed 2 screws to keep things from canting, to keep them parallel.
Yep.
So I've just taken some walnut strips using your dovetail bit, and I've made walnut strips and then a die. I do just a tap and die to create the same thread, so I can have my 2 screws. But yeah, I'm a huge advocate for the match fit system.
We're playing with a lot of things. We've been working with a new supplier to get some more hardware made, and one of the things that we are introducing shortly is right now we have the 1-inch screws and we have the 1.5 inch. 2s are coming.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll add up a little bit. That'll, give you a little more reach. But there's a lot of new products coming out soon that are going to be really fun. We have our new blade clean system, which I just sent one to Coleman for evaluation. So I believe that Klingspor will probably be carrying that. It's actually like we're waiting for it to show up. I've got a couple here at the shop, but it will be hitting the stores before Christmas. So you guys will be able to look at that. It's a really interesting product because it's designed to clean your blades, but literally you can clean a blade in 30 seconds, start to finish.
Wow.
So, I know that I didn't used to clean my blades as often as I should because it was a 20-minute process and it was a pain. And a lot of people who don't know really what they're doing, very few hobby woodworkers are going to use a carbide blade to the point where they're going to actually dull the carbide, not within a couple of years anyway. But usually they send them out to be sharpened because they're not cutting well. It's because they're dirty.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to clean it in 30 seconds, you can clean it at the beginning of each shop session if you want to, and you'll always have the best possible cuts. And it works with blades from 7 1/4 to 12 in diameter. And there's a router bit cleaning well in addition built into it. So it's going to be a really cool addition to to our line. That's coming out before Christmas. And then early next year, we got a couple of new products that are really exciting. I can't talk about them yet, but they'll be coming out at the beginning of next year. Not quite in time for Christmas, unfortunately, but coming out. But the one thing I will say is for anybody who's thinking about buying things or telling your family what you want for Christmas on your woodworking list, you guys know this as well as I do. Get it now. Don't wait to order. I know everybody's waiting for Black Friday and all that, but the supply chain being what it is, the good news for MicroJig is most of our products are made here in the U.S. We do have supply right now. We had a rough summer not being able to get what we wanted when we wanted it, but right now we've got good inventory levels of everything. So at least on our end, we're going to be able to make sure that the stores have what they need. But everybody I've talked to, every retailer I've talked to has been like, I can never predict what's going to be on the shelf when you walk in my door.
Yeah.
So, for anybody who's participating and listening, do not wait. If you're going to order something, if you're going to buy something, do it sooner rather than later, because heaven knows whether it'll be on the shelf or not when you go to get it. And that's not just woodworking products. That's everything.
Oh, yeah.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, it's just been crazy. When Amazon can't deliver in 2 days, that there's a supply chain.
There's an issue somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, other questions, guys, or anything else you need to discuss?
I'm not seeing any questions, but I can tell you from my personal use, I made the mistake of utilizing the match fit system on my drill press, and I was hooked from then on.
Oh, yeah.
So now my whole shop is pretty much being, before I build anything, how can I integrate match fit into that? And that's kind of my train of thought now for anything, because I've figured out how versatile it is and how to really make it work in my shop. So,
how you liking that handle I sent you?
Oh, matter of fact, I put it on there and posted it the same day, and I've already got an idea for the other handle, but I'm in the middle of water crisis in my house. So remodel has taken hold of my life over the last month.
No kidding. Yeah, that's the other thing, is the handle is going with that hardware package, like I sent to you. We are going to be, in the not very distant future, we're going to be offering the gripper handle as a separate item with 2 of the dovetail hardware pieces. It is on our website as a replacement part for the gripper itself, with the 1/4-20 hardware you need for the gripper, but we're actually going to be bringing it out with the match fit hardware, so you can put this on any jig or fixture, table saw, sled, or whatever you want. So that's going to be available in the not too distant future as well, and I think that's going to be very popular. The pricing on it is going to be very attractive as well. So, because one of the things I was doing, I found myself in my home shop, using gripper handles for different things, because where do you get a good, nice, ergonomically comfortable handle for your jigs and sleds? You can't find them at Home Depot or Lowe's or someplace like that. And even searching online, I just haven't really been able to find them at any realistic price. And the ones that you do find aren't terribly comfortable, and they're $20 a unit. Yeah. So a good jig handle has been something I've been dying for a long time. And Chris, I noticed, that's why I sent you the one, because you made that really nice wooden handle that's on your sled. But I'll bet that took you quite a fair amount of time to make and make it look that nice.
Well, actually, it wasn't too bad. I cut 4 pieces out on the CNC and glued 2. I made 2 different handles. I cut them out on the CNC, and then once I glued them together, I just used a round over and rounded over all the edges.
So but it looked really good, but it is a lot of work, and it's again, with the match fit system, you can have a couple of handles and just move them from jig to jig whenever you need to.
Well, this is something you probably didn't consider, but since your color is yellow, what I found that really is going to work well for not only my sled but for other jigs is the fact that it is a bright yellow. It helps you be alert to where your hand is placed.
Yep.
So if you're making a jig where you could potentially run the risk of putting your hand into the blade, having that handle locked to that jig at a specific location so that you're not randomly moving your hand about ensures that your hand is on that bright yellow handle so that you're safely making whatever operation you're trying to do.
Yep. No, absolutely. And, the yellow color really never was it was a safety thing. And in fact, originally we made the gripper in black and yellow. So kind of like the hazard tape has the black and yellow stripes was the concept. Interesting story. We ended up stopping that in 2013, mostly because we were getting an inordinate number of calls from customers, calls and emails saying, so what's the difference between the yellow parts and the black parts? And there is no difference. It's just the colorant that goes into the plastic. But we just decided to go all yellow because we were tired of answering the question.
Thanks,
That makes
Festool,
sense.
for making color coordinated products where colors mean something.
Well, and I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last couple of years, we've been doing that with all of our hardware. So anything that's 1032 now is green. Any knobs and whatnot that are quarter 20 are yellow. I think we've got 832 in black. So we've kind of moved away from some of the older stuff. You'll be able, here you've got black knobs. These are 1032. Well, this is an older piece. On the new grippers, these are yellow. These are green now because they're 1032. And all of the hardware is green because it's 1032. So yeah, we've been color coordinating as well. And it does make a difference in being able to identify what's what, especially when you got 832 and 1032 hardware sitting next to each other. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell which is which without actually having to screw it together.
Agreed.
Yeah,
All right.
I like the new XP clamps. I keep asking when MicroJig's going to offer some sort of attachment to where you can convert the old clamps to the new clamp style with spring and all of that.
Only problem with the conversion is you have to drill into that arm, drill and tap the arm. And the problem is if you go too deep, then you weaken the arm. And, so that's one of the concerns we have with that. We've been in discussions about that. So, that may be something that happens in the future. The more we hear from customers, the more often, it's not uncommon for us to do products that react to customer need. I'll give you an example. We sell both the dovetail bit and the relief bit in 1/4-inch shanks. Originally, we didn't want to. A lot of people don't realize that a 1/2-inch shank is not twice as stiff as a 1/4-inch shank. It's 8 times stiffer.
Yep.
And for those of us that run CNCs, you could tell just by ear when you're cutting with a 1/4 versus a 1/2, because that 1/4 just screams. But so many customers are using either, the 1 horsepower Bosch Colt type router or, some of the early Craftsman and Ryobi routers that only came with a 1/4-inch collet, that we kind of had to, we weren't planning to do it, but enough people asked, so now we are. So, it does happen. And we, believe it or not, we actually offer both of those bits in metric shanks as well for our European customers. So we don't sell a huge number of them, but that's a growing business for us over in Europe. We sell almost none here in the US, but that is something that we have the ability to do. So, when hearing from guys like you, that really helps us to dial in our efforts and, what we're looking at. But part of my job now is developing new product, and I work directly with Henry Wang. So I've got a board sitting next to me with probably a dozen different projects on it that we're in the middle of working through. Yep.
Sorry, I'm just trying to look at your board.
Hey, anytime you come down to Orlando, man, come on in. We'll have a conversation. We'll make you sign an NDA first, but we'll have a conversation.
Now, Chris, you were part of the MicroJig match fit contest, and I noticed that they finally posted, so I can say something about it, that you were one of the winners of that. So
Yes,
congratulations on that.
Yeah, there was some talented folks in there. Some really cool ideas.
I got to tell you, now last year we did the same contest, but instead of doing 20 winners and giving something to each of 20 winners, we had a really big package that went to, I think, 2. And I kind of like this format better because there are so many good things that we can reward doing it this way that, it's very, very difficult sometimes to choose one or two people out of, the multitude that we get in, when there are so many people who have, stuff that's just noteworthy or worthy of reward. It might be the way that they execute. It might be the originality of their idea. It just, sometimes it's really, really hard to try and narrow it down to one or two. So having the 20 this time, I think, was a lot more fun for me, because I got to, it felt like I was being, like I was Santa Claus. I was a little more generous, throwing clamps in all directions. So that worked out pretty good. But yeah, we're gonna do that every year, and I think it's a really good opportunity. And there were so many cool things that we saw that was just like, ooh, I never thought of that. Ooh, that really looks nice. Henry spotted one, and he was just like, the first thing he said was, everything's made so nicely and neatly, and it's clean, and there's no tear out. And, because he's very, very detail oriented like that. That's what makes him so good at what he does. And yeah, so it was a different contest this year, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, poor Morgan we spent about an hour and 20 minutes talking like the three of us are here now, discussing all of those entries and coming up with. So he had to take like that hour and 20 of video and edit it down into the 15 or 20 minutes that he's got now. And that, I know how difficult that can be.
Oh yeah. But now that a lot of times I'll build quick, just sloppy jigs just for function.
Yep.
And then after I build it, I was like, I'll be like, wow, that really worked a whole lot better than I thought it did. And then I'll go back eventually and maybe rebuild it in a nicer way.
Even though it's functional, you hate working with it because it just doesn't look good.
Oh yeah, the dead man that I built just is horrendous looking. I mean, it just, if you looked at the way the wood is warped, and the giant horseshoe looking thing is all jacked up. But for what I needed it to do, which was hold the dust pipe while I was fixing it, and then later on realizing it makes a great holder for cabinet installation. Just I'm going to go back and refix that a little bit and make it where I can make it a little more versatile for other things using the same kind of premise. So it's kind of turned some ideas, and seeing some of those videos from some of the winners, it kind of gave me some other ideas on how to tweak a few things that I'm already using to make it even better. So huge fan. The only thing I haven't gotten into is the splitter, and I've already decided that once I upgrade my insert, the splitter system is the next MicroJig purchase I'm going to get into.
I'm a big fan of the riving knife. I mean, I hate to say it, but I've been a professional woodworker for more than 30 years, and the number of shops I've worked in that actually have a blade guard that's on the saw, you could count on one hand. I think it's less safe than not having it. OSHA disagrees with me, but there it is. But the riving knife is definitely something that is very, very useful. But some of us don't have it. I've got an old Unisaw, and my Unisaw, I've had it for years. I'm the only person that ever uses it. It's in perfect tune. It does everything I need it to do. So replacing it just to get the riving knife doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But, with the splitters, I can get most of the functionality of the riving knife. The only thing the splitters don't do is with the bevel cut. But I can get 99% of the functionality out of the that I would have with the riving knife. I've got that protection. I'm protecting myself from the kickback. Yeah, I use them all the time, and I agree with that. It's a great product. It's. I mean, I work for MicroJig, so what do you think I'm going to say?
well, I don't, and I can tell you that just from what I've seen,
it's a great product.
Fantastic. I mean, I've got an old Delta contractor saw that the guard and everything is gone. I ended up finding somewhere on some site one of those lift systems that allows you to lift the riving knife up, and it's even got the anti-kickback devices in it. The problem is it only works for full curve blades. And I use that 50 tooth combo from Freud, the thin curve.
Yep.
and obviously that won't work. So, but I don't want to buy the splitter until I get a better insert so that I can properly install that system. Right now, I'm
Yeah,
still
and
using the old crappy metal thing that came with it, and so that's
Give you
next on my list.
give you an idea of what it looks like. It's on the screen. It's basically points that you put into your insert plate behind the blade to create a riving knife for saws that cannot be retrofitted or have riving knives originally, and it comes in thin kerf as well as full kerf.
yep. And
And
the beauty
plastic
part
and
is
steel.
you
Mhm.
can, just like a riving knife, and most people don't even realize this, you change from one blade to another, you should be adjusting your riving knife to fit, because the width of the tooth of your blade and the thickness of the body of the blade may be different. Even if the two blades have the same curve, if the body thickness is different, that curve is going to move a little bit left to right. That's why they're all adjustable.
Mhm.
The splitters are adjustable side to side, but because with the Pro Kit that you just showed, you're using two of them, you can also adjust the actual width of the curve. So between, the outer face of one to the outer face of the other, so you get a multiple of adjustability. And if you're going to be changing blades, then working with our arbor shim set, the arbor shims are shims that are designed, they're kind of, think of like dado shims, but they go between the arbor of your saw and the blade body. And the way they work is you set up so that all of your blades are now cutting at exactly the same plane on the right side, the rip side of your blade. If you change from a full kerf to a thin kerf or from one blade to another, doesn't matter. They're all cutting that same right side plane. Now you can set your riving knife or your splitters to that location and never have to move them again. And that makes everything a lot safer and a lot easier to work with. For people who change blades regularly, it's a godsend. For those who use a combo blade for most things, and that Freud you're talking about is an awesome blade.
Mhm.
That's the one, in fact, that I was using in the video to make the half lap cuts. I was using the 1/8 inch version, but it's a great blade. And you need to use the thin kerf with your saw because you're probably running what, 1.5, 1.25 horse.
It's a 1.5 horsepower motor, but I have converted it over to 220, so I am running a little more efficiently.
Right. But the whole point of the thin kerf blade is so that a saw that's a little, less powered like that can make the same cut as a 3 or 4 horse cabinet saw with a thicker blade. Again, the difference, it's like 1/32 of an inch difference between a full kerf and a thin kerf blade, but the amount of torque required to turn it through a piece of oak is significantly different. It's a lot of people don't realize how much science and physics goes into making a saw blade. It's ridiculous. I've been to a couple of factories where they make them, and the amount of technology that goes into what's a simple saw blade is just amazing sometimes.
Oh yeah. Well, and we appreciate the innovative mind that Henry's got, because, or at least I do for sure. Because man, I tell you, I'm in love with a lot of the products and use them personally in my shop. So, when people call in and they start asking me questions about T-Track type products, I'm not opposed to it, but I certainly share my
There's a
thoughts
better
and
way.
versatility of using the match fit style system. And then you've kind of built, I know everything started with a gripper, but you've sort of built this whole market around making your shop life better and more efficient. And see, MicroJig has done a fantastic job with that. So I don't know about all the other store guys, but me personally, I'm a huge advocate, and it's going to be in my shop. So
yeah, it's interesting because the match fit system is actually beginning to rival the gripper in our sales hierarchy. We're not that far away from the match fit line being equally important to us on a revenue side as the gripper is, and the gripper is by far our most popular product. So it's it's a great time to be looking at what you want and buying. And the fun thing with the match fit system is you can put it on your Christmas list. You could go for the clamps at one price level, but if you go for like the hardware kits, those are stocking stuffers. You can. When my kids were young, you always had to pick those like little things that they could afford with their allowance or whatever. And even now they're older, and I still end up paying for my own gifts. I'm not sure how that works.
I understand.
We got to figure it out.
You know, I just thought of a way around the instead of not mounting a spring to the smaller clamp, making some type of depth stop that's already shaped like the clamp profile that can slide up and down, and just a simple set screw. You know,
I'll give you another option. O-rings.
Yeah.
O-rings are awesome for that. You can basically take the nut out the end of the shank, slide the O-ring down over it, put your arm back over, and now you can move that O-ring to wherever you want, and it's just enough to keep the arm from falling down, like when you're doing a jig and you want to change from one part to the other. That's what the entire AP clamp is for. That spring, it's anti-pivot is what AP stands for, and it keeps that arm from tipping and then sliding. And one of the things I like that for is when I am using a jig at the router table or at the table saw, and I'm cutting one part and then I want to shift to the other, I don't have to worry about lifting that whole clamp up, the whole arm up every time I want to put a new piece in. I can just loosen, slide it in, tighten, go.
Yeah,
So,
and the one-off uses is that there's no issue there, but definitely when you're doing multiple production type cutting,
it makes
and
all the
I've
difference.
seen people use rubber bands and other types of homemade remedies for that, but that and maybe a clamp a little longer. Other than that, everything else is fantastic.
I'm not gonna. I can't say anything, but keep your eyes open. I'll let you know. There's a
say
lot of
anything
things
here.
in the works. We're having a lot of fun with it. It's I got to tell you, I've got one of the best jobs in the world because I get to play with all this stuff, and I spent the last 2 days because just a lot of the video that you just saw, a lot of it was recycled from before other things I've done, but quite a bit of that was shot yesterday and today. So basically, I got paid to play in my shop and create content, and I get to do this all the time. So it's a lot of fun, and it's like, oh, what do I need next? And it's a great way to make a living, and I'm having a ball with it. But yeah, stay in touch because we're gonna be bringing out some really fun stuff over the next 12 months.
Well, anything I see new on the front of MicroJig, I'm usually going into the purchasing manager's office and go, "Hey, we're going to bring this in." I don't know. I haven't even thought about it. I haven't heard about it. Well, let me just tell you, you should bring it in.
I'll just tell you about it. We're basically selling it for you, which is hilarious.
Yeah,
it's always good, and when I go to the shows, especially like the Klingspor show, I've been there out to you guys in Hickory several times for your fall extravaganza, and it's always fun because I'll be standing there talking and doing my demos and whatever, and people will be standing there watching, and there's always some guy in the crowd going, "I've got them. You got to buy them. It's the best thing I ever got from my shop." And I'm always like, "Yeah, check's in the mail, dude. Thanks."
Yeah, we used to laugh because when we first started selling the gripper, which was the thing that kind of started MicroJig, we would go a year and not sell hardly any, and then Henry and his son would show up to the show, and all weekend they would just be blasting through stuff on the MicroJig, and they would have a wall of gripper boxes, behind them. And at the end of the show, they'd be like, "Yeah, we're out of stock. You got any more?" We're like, so it was just crazy. It's one of those tools you got to use.
Yeah, and we're in Lowe's, we're in Walmart, we're in Home Depot, all of those places, Menards and whatever, and we love being in those stores. But it's the brick and mortar retailers like Klingspor that actually sell the product for us, because it isn't something when you walk into somebody who walks into Home Depot and sees this.
Yeah,
it's right next to the $20 5-piece safety set, a push stick and a couple of featherboards. They don't know. And so, using it, displaying it, we don't make the same products as everybody else. If we were selling, let's say a miter gauge, everybody makes a miter gauge. So we don't have to teach the customer what a miter gauge does. All we have to do is explain to them why ours is better.
Yeah.
But with our product line, it's an advantage that we're not competing, for bottom dollar with everybody else competing on price alone. But the disadvantage is we have to spend a lot of time and energy educating, which is why I love doing things like the shows and this show and other things, because it gives us the chance to get out there. But what's really interesting is online sales generally, we sell about 7 GR100s, the basic gripper, for each GR200. When I go to a show, it's exactly the opposite. I'll sell far more 200s because the value proposition is much easier to explain in person.
Oh yeah.
And the big double pack, we have the complete kit that has 2 grippers with everything in it. I've been to shows where I've sold more of those than individual grippers. So, if you can explain the value proposition and you have I love being out in the field and talking with the customer. I just love doing the shows. That's why I was so bummed, for the last year and a half, that we haven't been doing shows. I'm doing my first one next month in Ohio, so that's going to be fun. But it's, I just love getting out, and Henry does too. So, he was going to go to the show I'm headed for in November. Henry was like, "Oh, I should go to that with you." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's have fun." And then his wife reminded him that they have a family trip thing planned, so that's not going to happen. But
hopefully
the
next
shows
year.
are great. Yeah, the shows are great. Again, I'm looking forward to Klingspor next year. Didn't work out this year, but hopefully, knock wood, we'll be in a better place next year, and we'll get back to being able to see each other and work face to face. But I want to thank you, Mike, for your time and for the opportunity to come here and do this. Really appreciate it and had a great time. And anybody, tell your customers if you have any questions or whatever. We have our team here. They can reach out to us by email or by phone. We answer questions. We can help out people with whatever. And obviously, you guys at Klingspor are there to help us out as well and to help the customers. So,
absolutely,
our brick and mortar retailers, you guys are our bread and butter. You're our lifeline. So we do everything we can to support you guys and help you support the customers.
And we thank you.
We appreciate you coming on and keep putting out good stuff, and I'll keep using it.
We'll see you next year. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it a lot.
Thank you, Ralph.
All right. Have a good one.
Have
You too,
a great
man.
day.
So that's going to conclude today. We'd like to thank Stevie from Built by Stevie coming in, Ralph from MicroJig coming in, talking about that. Also want to mention that the sale for 30% off books and DVDs also gets extended to Mr. Ralph Bagnal's CNC machining book, A Beginner's Guide to CNC Machining in Wood. Make sure you check that out at woodworkingshop.com. Also, 10% off CA glues and finishes from Mohawk Finishes, 15% off abrasive disc sheets, rolls, you name it, belts, anything that is abrasive that we carry is 15% off. 10% off ArborTech, Cutsaw, and select King Arthur tools as well. So, the gripper actually right here in this situation on the joiner was the first time I've ever used one, because if you've ever used those little angle blocks, they're not safe. But that is very ergonomic, and that's how I got started, and I don't look back. Like, that's the only way I go now. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things. That guy in the crowd saying I got one, it's you got to get one for your shop. I was that guy too at one time for sure, in the crowd being like, yes, he's not joking. This is a great product.
And it's not just a funky looking yellow tool there. The gripper part is a sort of proprietary green rubbery material that's on the bottom. It's got these little dimples that actually grab and hold on to your part while you're pushing it through. And I've actually got a couple of those myself, as well as the push block. And one of the cool features on their push block is when you run it all the way to the back, it's got 2 little pieces that'll actually slip down and engage the back end of your piece. So it's they've got a very versatile line, and I'm I know it seems like I'm promoting them, but I am, because they're that good. They're that good.
Say, something you use is not hard to promote. It's the truth. It's in your shop. It's actually behind you. I can see it right there on your table saw. Let me get you this real quick. There it is. You're talking about the rip block
there.
Yep.
That's it.
And so those little drop downs that he's mentioning actually also disappear. So if you don't need them, they do fold into the plastic housing there, making it very versatile. The The green part is a proprietary product, and it does work. And even if it's dusty, what I liked about it is even if the piece is dusty, you don't have to worry about cleaning it off like you do some of those rubber mats like the other blocks have. This one will actually keep gripping. I don't think the only time I've ever ruined one was with silicone, like where I silicone the bed of the planer and then put that down on there, and then it started losing its grip because it had silicone on it. But that was it.
Simple Green.
That doesn't help their sales any. If I'd known that, I would have soaked it. Anyways, so thank you again for joining us. This is Klingspor's Woodworking Shop Woodworking Extravaganza 21st Annual. You can visit us at woodworkingextravaganza.com for all past events. And the final show is tomorrow, 10 a.m. We're going to be doing a recap, and we're thinking about opening it up for everybody. So if you want to join in and ask us questions and be live on the air, and we do have the ban button. We do have a ban hammer. So don't get crazy. Don't think you're going to come in here and get political or religious. We don't do that. We're just talking woodworking.
That's right.
So if you want to join us, please do. It'd be a lot of fun. And so for Klingspor's Woodworking Shop, I'm Mike Z.
I'm Chris.
And we will see you later.